Hi everybody, I hope you're all well. I have a new project for you today, a painting project. We're going to be making this watercolor greeting card, a simple happy birthday greeting card with summery flowers and a pretty pink background. So let's get right into it. And I'll tell you the story about this greeting card. I was having a lovely walk. We've had kind of a slow spring here, but I was having a lovely walk a little while ago, and I found myself walking in what felt like a field of dandelions, of bright yellow, beautiful dandelions, and it just got me thinking about dandelions and how we think of them as weeds. And I just, kneeled down and looked at these flowers, and for a moment I thought how odd it is that these can be considered weeds when so many other beautiful flowers with the same kind of color are not considered weeds. And it just got me thinking, and I guess it got me thinking that I would want to spend some time with you and paint a beautiful greeting card to kind of give dandelions back a little bit of their fame. And I thought that they might need that. I'm just readjusting here to put my paper. So this is just 4x6 100% cotton watercolor paper, and I am just going to place this here so that you can have a good look at it while I paint and while we chat. This might be a bit of a chattier video today. So I've just taken some tape, some really thin washi tape here, and you'll have seen me just make the border for my card, and then I can also kind of tape down some of this tape here so that my card doesn't move while I'm painting. There we go, you have a good view of that. And now I'm going to add some color in. So I'm going to start with this paintbrush here, my number 8 Van Gogh paintbrush, and I'm going to add in a couple different yellow kind of hues to my palette. So I'm going to start with this kind of punchier yellow here and just mix a little bit of that in with a lot of water. And I'm going to use these 3 different yellows here and see how I get on. So I'm going to add this here. And I was wondering if you've ever had that thought, sort of thinking about what kind of makes it as a premium element versus what is considered something to get rid of. And I really had that thought as I was holding that dandelion in my hand, because I actually find the flower to be quite beautiful. And so that was my inspiration for today. And also for anybody who's watched my videos before, you'll know that I'm quite partial to yellow, especially with watercolor. I think it's such a beautiful color to use. And so that all kind of makes sense with dandelions to be playing around with those colors. So I'm just mixing these 3 different colors here. As you'll see, there's kind of more kind of neon yellow, and then these 2 yellows are a little bit maybe more muted, but beautiful colors as well. I'm not seeing much difference between these 2, but let's see how they fare on paper. Okay, so now I'm going to start, and I think what I'll do before I begin is I'm actually going to take a piece of tape here, maybe a thicker piece of tape, so bear with me. Yes, here we go. I'll take a thicker piece of tape, and I'll just add that piece of tape in the middle of my card so that I can add a message afterwards. So let's see, I'm going to go for kind of bottom third here of my card, and that will just make it so that I can paint all around that tape, and then when I take the tape off at the end, I will be able to write a message. So I'm going to start with this yellow here, and I'm just going to kind of think about the shape of my dandelion and just add kind of very, very thin kind of strands like so. And I'm starting with my lighter color, and then I will add kind of some darker colors afterwards. So I'm going to make maybe one here, maybe one right here, and I'll make a third one, let's see, right here. And if you're able to find a paintbrush that has a little bit of a kind of tapered point at the end, like I'm using here, you'll see that it makes this kind of work much easier if you're trying to create kind of that point here. So we've had a very slow spring here. It's been pretty cold, and here's Canada in case you're wondering. So it's actually been really nice to see a lot of the flowers finally come out. So I think I'm happy with that. So I'm really just making these really thin lines, and now I'm going to move on to this color right here and kind of add a little bit of dimension to my flowers and see how that paint kind of interacts. This is the beauty of watercolor, isn't it? To kind of see how these lines mix with one another and kind of letting the paint do its work, do its thing. Okay, so I think that looks pretty nice here. I'll let this kind of dry, and I think while I'm waiting, so I am making sure, if you are using this kind of tape here when you do your card, obviously do whatever composition feels right to you, but do make sure that you're kind of creating a composition that would normally go further than your piece of tape, because if you don't do that, then when you take the tape out, it might look a little bit strange, like you won't have the effect of kind of cutting the flower or whatever it is that you're painting in the middle. It might look a little bit odd. You won't really get that striking effect of the beautiful white line. So I'm going to make another flower maybe up here, and I'm doing this one slightly lighter in tone, so that means basically adding more water, because I'm sort of imagining that this flower is a bit further away from my eyesight. And so we're seeing it a little bit less clearly. And I'll just pop a little bit of my darker hue inside, like so. So I'm loosely kind of drawing inspiration from a dandelion, but I'm kind of, as I usually like to do, doing my own piece of work now, kind of loosely based on what a dandelion looks like. And I'm going to move on now to this khaki kind of color here to make my stem. So I'm using the khaki color straight from my palette here. Oh, and I should tell you, this is the Koi watercolor palette. I'll put all the information down below, but you'll see me using this palette quite a lot. It has a lot of really beautiful colors in it. It's very inexpensive, and I find that the paint quality is actually really quite nice. So I've used this khaki green in quite a lot of different works, and I really like it. And now I'm going to move on to this kind of darker green right here. And what I'll do is I'll pop this here, and you'll see that's quite a bit darker. But what I like to do is to add a little bit of my ochre color right here. And you'll see when I mix those two together, I get a really beautiful muted green. Actually, I made a whole video on how adding this color really transforms your greens. Actually, you see I'm getting kind of a darker khaki green there. So that's a good tip. If you're finding your greens to not be maybe natural looking enough, adding some ochre to them really does help. Okay, so I'm just going to imagine kind of my leaves falling here on the side, right where my stem kind of begins. And then what I like to do is kind of paint right through the tape. And I find that really gives you the best effect. You'll see when I take off the tape at the end, imagining kind of your stems and everything else going right through will give you that most clear, believable kind of line, and that will give you the best effect once you go ahead and remove the tape. So I think that looks pretty nice here. I think what I will do is I will add actually a little bit of my ochre, the one I just used with my green, and I'll use that ochre here and mix it into my green, into my yellow, pardon me, just to get a bit of a darker color still, just to kind of create the center of my flower here. I have a little bit of a hair here on my brush. There we go. And create kind of a darker color here. And because I've used the ochre in both the yellow and the green, I find that helps give me kind of the cohesion that I'm after. And then I'll just use that color to create a little bit of extra dimension kind of in the tips of my petals, strands. I want to call them strands. Actually, that really is what they kind of look like, isn't it? And then here on the side there. I think that looks quite nice, and that didn't take us very long to do at all, did it? So I think what I'll do now is I will go use my trusty hairdryer and dry this card so that it's ready to continue, and then I will show you how I will finish it off. Okay, I am back and my card is now dry, but I thought as I was looking at this, and actually that's a good tip too, sometimes you don't know exactly what your composition is going to look like, but once you have a couple elements on the page, you might start to think that it's missing something, which is what I thought when I was looking at this, and I thought I'm just going to add a little bit of greenery all around, and I think that it will make my flowers kind of stand out. So I'm going to take some brighter green here. You see that? Yes, you can. Oh, a little bit of paint here, that's okay. And what I'll do is I'll just go ahead and kind of create some foliage here. Imagine that there's kind of some tall grass type of foliage all around. Might mix a little bit of my darker green in and just create kind of a bit of a background here. And I am again trying to go through my my tape here so that when I take the tape off, I get that pretty edge. So I think that looks quite nice. It feels like more of maybe a natural looking field. Maybe here. I am leaving a little bit of white space here on purpose because I think the card does need a little bit of breathing room, and I think we'll get it by leaving that right here. And by incorporating some of the green that I used in the rest of my stems, I think I'm getting kind of that sense of pretty cohesion of green that I'm looking for. Okay, so what do we think? I think that looks pretty nice. Tell me in the comments what you think, but I think that kind of brings it together. So what I'll do is I will give this a moment again with my trusty hair dryer, and I will dry this, and then we can finish off our card. Okay, so last step before I actually go in and add my message is doing a bit of a background. I find that when you're using tape, like I've done here to create a really nice border, like the small tape I mean on the side, it is nice to have a little bit of a background, because again, that's going to make your card look so nice once you take the paint off. The tape, oh my goodness, not the paint, the tape. Once you take it off, and so you really want to go right to the edge. And I'm just adding a tiny bit of this color, and I actually really think of this pink kind of like a neutral. It's a very soft pink, and so I think it kind of goes with whatever color you're using, but it adds a little bit of dimension. It makes things kind of stick out in a lovely way. And as you see, I'm just using a little bit of my paint, but not too dark of a color. Maybe a little bit more here at the bottom where my kind of grass might meet the soil, and I'm just filling in any kind of white that I can see, like so. And I think that is going to help make it look like a lovely polished finished card when I am done. So that's what it looks like now. I'm going to dry the card again. That is the long part of the process, I guess, just being a bit patient while it dries. But with a hairdryer, it really doesn't take that long. And then I will show you how I stamp the card to make my messaging. Okay, so my card is dry, and obviously the way to test for that is to just kind of tap the tip of your finger and make sure that you don't have anything on your finger, because sometimes it might look dry and it isn't. But now I can go ahead and stamp my card. So I think I'm just going to make this a simple happy birthday card, but of course you could write whatever message you want. I'm using this all-purpose ink pad, which I've talked about here before. It's my favorite ink to use. It's lovely. It adheres really well. It's good for fabric, it's good for paper, and I really like it. And I'm just using a black color here. So what I'll do is I will peel this off, and you see you get your lovely, nice straight line. And I think it makes sense now what I was talking about, that you do really want to create color as much as you can on the top and the bottom so that you do get that effect. And I'm going to use these little stamps that I have now that you just kind of attach like so. So I'm starting with birthday because I only have one of each of these letters, and so so happens that birthday only has one of each letter, and I don't need two, if that makes sense. I'm going to tap into my ink, and then what I do like to do is test before, because I have learned the hard way that if you don't test it out, sometimes there might not be enough ink or something goes wrong, and then it's kind of hard to go back from there. So that looks pretty nice right here. So I'm going to dip it one time in once again, and then let's see, there we go. So that says birthday here, and then we're going to go ahead to write happy. So as I was saying, I only have one of each of these, so happy having two P's. I do this in two goes, which is okay. So I'll start with my HAP here, like so. At the edge of my card, and then I will go in with my P and my Y to finish off my word. There we go. There we go. I kind of like the effect of these stamps. They look a little bit vintage in their nature, and I think they just look quite lovely. And now, in the moment of truth, I can peel off my tape here. So you want to do this kind of slowly, although washi tape is pretty forgiving, I will say. I have yet to really have a card tear, except when I'm really not being patient and going fast. So there we go. Peeling this off like so. You might get a little nervous when you do this, thinking that some of the tape might get underneath. I guess it did a little bit here, but usually it does a pretty good job. And even when it does, I don't mind the effect. Tell me what you think in the comments, but I think it is a hand-painted card after all. So it shouldn't look like something that's been printed. There we go. And that's our card. A little ode to beautiful, beautiful dandelions.